I always believed my mother's love was unconditional, until I woke up in a rehab facility with nothing but silence where she should have been. She had visited once to argue about hospital bills, then simply walked away from the wreckage of my life. I thought I was entirely alone until my grandfather, a quiet man I had underestimated for 33 years, arrived with a single legal document. He did not bring flowers. He brought a war. The silence in a rehabilitation center is not peaceful. It is a heavy, pressurized quiet, the kind that smells of antiseptic and floor wax and other people's despair. I lay in a bed that was not my own, staring at a ceiling tile with a water stain shaped remarkably like the state of Florida. My left leg was encased in a brace that felt less like a medical device and more like a shackle, and my ribs throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache that timed itself perfectly to my heartbeat. 33 years old. That was the number that kept cycling through my mind. I was 33 years old, and I required assistance to walk to the bathroom. I needed a stranger named Brenda to help me put on my socks, because bending at the waist was currently a physical impossibility, but the physical humiliation was manageable. You can breathe through pain. You can close your eyes and dissociate while a nurse changes the dressing on a laceration that runs down your arm like a roadmap of bad luck. What I could not breathe through, what settled in my chest heavier than the bruised ribs, was the emptiness of the plastic chair in the corner of the room. It was a gray chair with metal legs. It was meant for visitors. It was meant for family. For the first 3 days after the accident, I floated in a haze of medication and shock. I remembered the sound of metal screaming against metal, the smell of burning rubber, and the terrifying weightlessness of the car spinning off the road. But those memories were fragmented. Like shards of glass I could not quite piece together. The memory of my mother, however, was crystal clear. Marilyn Gray had come once. I had been awake, barely. She had stood at the foot of the bed, not touching me. She was wearing her charcoal blazer, the one she wore when she had to fire someone or negotiate a contract for her boutique real estate firm. Her hair was perfect, a helmet of blonde that never moved, and her makeup was applied with the precision of a restoration artist. She did not ask how I felt. She did not brush the hair off my forehead. She held a clipboard she had taken from the nurse's station and was reading the intake forms. I remembered her voice, sharp and tinny in the sterile room. "You listed your own insurance as primary," she had said, looking at me with eyes that were blue and entirely dry. "Do you have any idea what the out-of-pocket maximum is on your policy?" I had tried to speak, but my throat felt like it was filled with sand. I think I croaked out something about my leg. Marilyn had sighed. A short, clipped sound of irritation. I spoke to the billing office. She continued, tapping a manicured nail against the clipboard. "This facility is out of network for the first tier of your coverage." I told them that was unacceptable administrative negligence on their part. I told them I would not be authorizing any payments until a relentless audit was performed. "Mom," I had whispered, "it hurts." She finally looked at me then. For a second, just 1 second, I saw something flicker in her face. It might have been fear. It might have been disgust. It looked like she was looking at a stain on a silk blouse that she knew would never come out. "Haley, you are an adult," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You need to pull yourself together. I cannot handle this mess right now. I have the board meeting for the Preservation Society next week. I cannot have my focus split by your carelessness." Then she put the clipboard down on the rolling table, picked up her purse, and walked out. I waited for her to come back. I waited for hours. I waited for days. I told myself she went to get coffee. I told myself she went to move the car. I told myself she was overwhelmed and just needed a moment to cry in the hallway where I could not see her. But she never came back. She did not answer my calls. When I texted her, the messages showed as delivered, then read, and then sat there, unanswered, screaming their silence at me. By the time I was discharged 2 weeks later, the silence had hardened into a cold, heavy stone in my stomach. My ex-husband, Mark, picked me up. We had been separated for 8 months. A quiet, bloodless separation that involved more spreadsheets than shouting matches. Mark was not a cruel man. He was simply a man who viewed emotions as inefficiencies. He stood in the lobby of the rehab center, checking his watch. "I have the passenger seat reclined," he said when I wheeled myself toward him. "It should be easier for your leg." "Thank you, Mark," I said. He took my bag. It was small. I did not have much. "I stocked your refrigerator," he said as we walked to the car. "Milk, eggs, bread. I also put the trash cans out. Since it is Tuesday, thank you," I said again. He did not ask about the accident. He did not ask about my mother. He drove with both hands on the wheel, adhering strictly to the speed limit. It felt like I was in an Uber ride with a driver who was trying to maintain a 5-star rating by being polite but distant. When we pulled up to my duplex, he carried my bag to the door and unlocked it for me. "Do you need help getting inside?" he asked, looking at his phone. "I can manage," I said, leaning heavily on my cane. "Okay, let me know if you need anything logistical. I can forward your mail if it is still going to the old house." He got back in his car and drove away. I stood on the porch of the small, rented duplex I had moved into after the separation, clutching the handle of my cane until my knuckles turned white. I was 33 years old. I was alone. And the person who was supposed to be my safety net, the woman who had given birth to me, had looked at my broken body and worried about her schedule. Getting inside took 10 minutes. The act of stepping over the threshold, maneuvering the brace, and closing the door left me sweating and shaking. I collapsed onto the sofa, the cheap fabric scratching my cheek. The house smelled stale. It smelled like a place where no one had lived for 2 weeks. I needed to check my finances. The rehab stay, even with insurance, was going to be expensive. The ambulance ride, the emergency room, the surgery to place the pins in my leg. I pulled my laptop toward me from the coffee table, wincing as the movement pulled at my ribs. I logged into my bank account. My breath hitched. The balance on my checking account was lower than I expected, but that was not what made my heart stop. It was the savings account, the emergency fund Mark and I had split, the money I had carefully set aside for a down payment on a small house of my own. It was gone. $0.00. I stared at the screen, blinking, thinking surely it was a glitch. I clicked on the transaction history. Transfer to joint account ending in 4490. That was my mother's account. We had opened a joint account years ago, when I was in college, for tuition transfers. I had forgotten it even existed. I had certainly never used it. I clicked further. There was a notification in my inbox from the bank, dated 3 days after the accident. Temporary guardianship access granted. My hands started to tremble. She had used the accident. She had used the fact that I was incapacitated, unconscious, or medicated to claim she needed to manage my affairs, and she had cleaned me out. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. "Hi, you have reached Marilyn Gray. Please leave a detailed message." "Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "Mom, where is my money? Why did you move the savings? I need to pay for my prescriptions. Call me back, now." I hung up and threw the phone onto the cushion beside me. I felt like I was going to throw up. I tried to distract myself. I opened my work email. I was a graphic designer at Northline Creative Studio, a mid-sized firm in Briar Glen. I had been working on a major branding package for a new tech startup before the crash. There were dozens of emails. Most were generic company updates. A few were from clients wondering where their drafts were. Then I saw an email from HR. The subject line was, "Compassionate Leave and Performance Review." My stomach twisted. I opened it. "Dear Haley, we hope your recovery is proceeding well, per our previous discussion regarding the circumstances of your accident. We have placed you on a temporary leave of absence. We will need to discuss your return timeline and current project load. Please be advised that we have assigned the Tech Start project to Jason for the time being. The circumstances of your accident." The phrasing was odd, formal, cold. I opened a new message window and typed in the name of Sarah, the junior designer who sat next to me. We were not best friends, but we grabbed lunch together sometimes. "Hey Sarah," I wrote, "I am back home. Just saw the email about Jason taking the project. Is everything okay over there? The reply came 3 minutes later. Haley. Oh my God. I am so glad you are okay. It has been weird here. Weird how? I typed back. Sarah's typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Look, I probably should not say anything, but people are talking. After the police called the office to verify employment, a rumor started going around. What rumor? That you were impaired. When you crashed, Jason told everyone he heard you were drinking, or that you were on something. He said it was reckless driving. I stared at the screen, the white light burning my eyes. I had not been drinking. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. I had been driving back from a client meeting. I remembered the road being clear. I remembered the car suddenly feeling wrong, heavy, like it wasn't responding to me. I did not drink. I typed, hitting the keys hard. That is a lie. I know, Sarah replied. I told them that, but HR seems really skittish. Just be careful, okay? I closed the laptop. My head was spinning. My mother had stolen my money. My job thought I was a drunk, and I was sitting in a dark duplex with a leg that felt like it was on fire. A knock at the door made me jump. I did not want to answer it. I did not want to see anyone, but the knocking was persistent, firm. 3 solid raps, a pause, then 3 more. I grabbed my cane and hauled myself up. It took me a full minute to get to the door. When I opened it, I expected to see a delivery driver or maybe a neighbor complaining about the grass. It was my grandfather. Walter Gray stood on my porch in a tan raincoat and a fedora that looked like it belonged in a black and white movie. He was 78 years old, a man of few words and even fewer smiles. He had always been a peripheral figure in my life, present at Thanksgiving and Christmas, sitting in the armchair reading a newspaper while the rest of us argued or laughed. Haley, he said. Grandpa. I said, surprised. I did not know you were coming. May I come in? He asked. I stepped back, opening the door wider. He walked in, taking off his hat and placing it on the small entry table. He looked around the messy living room, his eyes taking in the pile of mail on the floor, the blanket on the couch, the laptop. He did not rush to hug me. He did not coo over my injury. He looked at my leg, his gaze clinical and assessing. Sit down, he said. You look unsteady. I sat back down on the couch. He took the armchair opposite me, sitting with a straight spine. He looked older than I remembered. His skin was like parchment paper, thin and translucent, but his eyes were sharp. They were the same blue as my mother's, but where hers were cold, his were intense. How is the pain? He asked. It is manageable. I lied. Do you have what you need? Food? Medicine? Mark brought groceries. I said, good. He clasped his hands over his knee. I tried to call your mother. He said, she is not answering me either. I looked down at my hands. She came to the hospital once, then she left. I know, Walter said. His voice was low, devoid of the pity I expected. I called the hospital. They told me she was the primary contact, but that she had placed a restriction on information sharing. She did what? I looked up, shocked. She blocked information release to anyone but herself. Walter said, I had to threaten legal action to find out if you were even discharged. Why would she do that? Walter did not answer the question. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a small notepad and a silver pen. Tell me about the insurance. Haley. What? The insurance. The hospital billing. Did you receive a letter today? I looked at the pile of mail on the floor. I had not even sorted through it yet. I don't know. I said. Walter leaned forward and picked up the stack of envelopes. He sorted through them with quick, efficient movements. He pulled out a thick envelope with a red stamp on it. Certified mail. Open this, he said, handing it to me. I tore open the envelope. My fingers felt clumsy. I pulled out 3 sheets of paper. It was from my auto insurance provider. Dear Ms. Gray, we are writing to inform you that your claim is currently under review due to discrepancies in the accident report and witness statements. Furthermore, We have received notice of a coordination of benefits conflict regarding your medical coverage. Coverage is suspended pending further investigation. My heart hammered against my ribs. Suspended? They are not paying, I whispered. Read the second paragraph, Walter said. I looked down. Please be advised that we have received information suggesting the vehicle may have been operated in a manner inconsistent with the policy terms. Inconsistent with policy terms? I looked at Walter. It sounds like they think you did it on purpose, or you were negligent, Walter said calmly. Or that someone told them you were. He sat back. I went to the police station this morning, he said, to get the accident report. And? There is a page missing. Haley. The narrative section, it is just gone, and the tow truck record lists the pickup time as 40 minutes before the 911 call was logged. That is impossible, I said. Exactly. He watched me, his face unreadable. Haley, who has keys to this house? Just me. And Mark. And, I hesitated. And Mom. She has a spare key. For emergencies. Walter nodded slowly. I met Mrs. Higgins outside. He said, your neighbor. The one with the hydrangeas. Yeah. I said, she is nice. She told me she saw Marilyn here. Last Tuesday. I froze. Last Tuesday? I was in the rehab center. She said Marilyn was here for about an hour. Walter said, she said she carried out an expanding file folder and a small, gray metal box. My blood ran cold. The lockbox. I kept a lockbox in the closet. It held my birth certificate, my passport, the title to my car, and the original copy of my lease. But more importantly, it held the backup drive for my computer. The drive that contained every design project I had ever worked on, every financial record, every tax return. She took my lockbox? I said, my voice rising. Why would she take my lockbox? Walter looked at me, and for the first time, his expression softened. It was not pity. It was something closer to grim solidarity. She is not just overwhelmed. Haley, he said, she is scrubbing the scene. Scrubbing the scene? Of what? My life? I am her daughter. Walter stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the street. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the room. Marilyn has always been particular about narratives, he said. She believes that if you control the paper, you control the truth. He turned back to me. I have a lawyer, he said, a man named Arthur Peake. He is not flashy, but he is thorough. Grandpa, I don't need a lawyer. I need my mother to call me back. I need to explain to my job that I wasn't drunk. I need my insurance to pay my bills. You need a lawyer, Walter repeated, because if Marilyn took that box, and if she moved that money, and if she is the one feeding stories to your insurance company, then she is not acting as your mother right now. She is acting as an adversary. I shook my head. It was too much. It was too fast. She wouldn't. I said, she is difficult. She is cold, but she wouldn't try to destroy me. Walter looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket again and pulled out a single sheet of folded paper. I need you to sign this, he said. What is it? It is a limited authorization. It allows me to request specific documents on your behalf, bank records, phone logs, the full, unredacted police report. It does not give me control over your money. It just gives me the power to see where it went. I looked at the paper. It was simple, typed on plain white stock. Why are you doing this? I asked. You never get involved. You just sit in your chair and read the paper. Walter's jaw tightened. I made a mistake a long time ago. He said, I let things slide because I wanted peace. I wanted to believe that family takes care of family. He placed the paper on the coffee table and set the silver pen on top of it. I am not making that mistake again. I looked at the pen. I looked at the certified mail envelope with its terrifying red stamp. I thought about the empty savings account. I thought about the way my mother had looked at me in the hospital, like I was a stain. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking, but I pressed the tip to the paper. If I sign this, I said, looking up at him, what are you going to do? Walter put his hat back on. He adjusted the brim, his eyes shadowed. I am going to find out why your mother is so afraid of a car accident that she is willing to bury her own daughter to hide it. I signed my name. Walter took the paper, folded it neatly, and placed it back in his pocket. Rest, Haley, he said. I will come back tomorrow. He walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the twilight. He did not look like a grandfather anymore. He looked like a general walking onto a battlefield. I sat in the silence of the darkening room, the pain in my leg throbbing in time with the question that was now screaming in my mind. What was in the lockbox that my mother wanted so badly? And what was she so terrified I would remember? The office of Harlow Peak Legal was not the kind of place you went to win $1 million settlement. It was the kind of place you went to draft a will that would not be contested, or to handle a property line dispute that had dragged on since the Reagan administration. It smelled of lemon furniture polish and old paper, located in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a dentist who had retired 3 years ago. My grandfather, Walter, held the door for me. I maneuvered my cane over the threshold, the rubber tip catching slightly on the worn carpet. Every step was a calculation. Lift, swing, plant, step, lift, swing, plant, step. The pain in my hip was a dull, rhythmic thumping, like a bass drum in the next room. Mr. Peak is waiting for us in the back, Walter said. He did not offer me his arm. He knew I hated being touched when I was trying to concentrate on walking. We went into a conference room that was barely large enough for the mahogany table inside it. Arthur Peak, a man who looked like he was made entirely of tweed and patience, stood up. Ms. Gray, he said, please, sit. I lowered myself into the chair, gritting my teeth as my legs straightened out. Walter sat next to me, placing his fedora on the table. Thank you for seeing us. Arthur, Walter said. Of course, Walter. Arthur opened a file folder. It was thick. The edges of the papers yellowed. I have the trust documents here. I assume you have explained the situation to Haley? I have not, Walter said. I looked between them. What trust? Walter turned to me. His face was composed, but his hands were clasped tightly together on the table. 30 years ago, he said, my brother fell ill. He had cancer. His wife. She left him, not immediately, but when the money started to go, and the care became difficult, she filed for divorce and moved to Arizona. She took half the assets and left him to die in a state facility. I blinked. I had never heard this story. I was the executor of his estate. Walter continued, or what was left of it. I watched him spend his final months worrying about how to pay for pain medication instead of saying goodbye to his children. He paused, looking at the file. When I set up my own estate planning, I created a trust. It is not a fortune. Haley, we are not wealthy people. It is a modest portfolio of bonds and a few rental properties I acquired over 50 years, but I included a specific clause. Arthur slid a piece of paper toward me. It was a photocopy of a legal document, dated 1995. The behavior clause. Arthur said, I read the highlighted paragraph. The legal jargon was dense, but the meaning was clear. The trust stipulated that if any beneficiary suffered a documented medical crisis, resulting in incapacitation or significant financial hardship, and the primary family caregiver willfully abandoned or neglected said beneficiary, the abandoner's share of the estate would be immediately forfeited and redirected to the injured party's care. I looked up. This is about Mom? Your mother is the primary beneficiary of my estate, Walter said, or she was. I felt a cold flush of shame. It felt wrong to be sitting here, discussing disinheriting my mother while she was, wherever she was. Grandpa, I said, I don't want her money. I just want her to come back. I want her to help me figure out the insurance. I don't want to punish her. This is not about punishment, Walter said, his voice hard. It is about survival. He pointed to the paper. Marilyn has access to family resources that I set up for her stability, but right now, you are drowning. You have no savings because she moved them. You have no income because you cannot work. You have medical bills that are piling up on my kitchen table because you cannot walk to your own mailbox." He leaned forward. "If I activate this clause, the trust releases an emergency stipend to you. It covers your physical therapy. It covers your rent. It covers a lawyer to fight the insurance company." "And what happens to Mom?" I asked. "Her access to the family holding company is frozen." Arthur said gently, "Until a review is conducted, frozen." I repeated, "She will hate me. She will never forgive me." "Haley," Walter said, "she has already left you." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "She has already left you." I looked at the document. I thought about the night before, when I had tried to cook pasta and dropped the pot because my leg gave out, leaving me sitting on the kitchen floor in a puddle of boiling water and tears, calling her number over and over again. "Do it," I whispered. Walter nodded to Arthur. "Execute the filing." Arthur picked up his pen. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. I was lying on my sofa, my leg elevated on 3 pillows, trying to ignore the throbbing ache that flared up whenever it rained. I picked up the phone. Missed call. Mom. My heart leaped into my throat. I stared at the screen. She had called. She had finally called. There was a voicemail. I pressed play, my thumb shaking. "Haley." Her voice filled the small room. It was not the voice of a worried mother. It was the voice she used when a contractor was late, or when a waiter brought her the wrong wine. It was polished, tight, and dangerous. I just received a notification from Arthur Peake's office. "I am frankly appalled that you would involve your grandfather in our private matters. He is an old man, Haley, and he is easily confused. Dragging family business into public systems is tacky. It is beneath us." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end. "I am handling your finances for your own protection. You are not in a state to make decisions. We both know that. And frankly, considering the nature of your accident, considering that it was not as random as you claim it was, you should be grateful I'm keeping things quiet instead of freezing your accounts entirely. Call Mr. Peake and tell him to withdraw that filing. Stop acting like a victim. It does not suit you." The message ended. I sat there, frozen, not as random as you claim. What did that mean? I replayed the sentence. Her tone suggested I had done something, that I was responsible. I closed my eyes, trying to summon the memory of the crash. I had been driving down Route 9. The speed limit was 45. I was doing 40. I remembered the sun glaring off the hood. I remembered the car in front of me braking. I remembered pressing my own brake pedal. And then, nothing. Not nothing in my memory. Nothing in the car. The pedal had gone to the floor. It had felt like stepping into a void. The car had not slowed down. It had surged, the weight of it carrying me forward into the intersection. I remembered swerving. I remembered the telephone pole. I remembered the crunch. I had told the police the brakes failed. I had told the doctors. But looking at the phone now, hearing my mother's insinuation, a worm of doubt burrowed into my stomach. Had I pressed the gas? Had I been distracted? Why would my own mother imply I caused it? The door opened. Walter had a key now. He came in carrying a white paper bag from the deli down the street and a thick manila envelope. He saw my face. "She called?" he asked. I nodded. "What did she say?" "She said I am confusing you. She said I should be grateful. She said the accident wasn't random." Walter set the sandwich on the table. He did not look surprised. "Play it for me." I played the message. Walter listened, his head cocked to the side, his eyes narrowed. When it finished, he didn't say anything for a long time. "She is scared," he said finally. "She doesn't sound scared." I said, "She sounds angry. Anger is just fear with a shield." Walter said. He tapped the manila envelope he had brought. "I went to the precinct today. I spoke to the desk sergeant. I used to play poker with his father." He pulled out a stack of papers. "This is the accident report. The full one, or as full as it gets." He laid 2 pages side by side. "Look at the page numbers," he said. "Page 1 of 5, page 3 of 5. Where is page 2? I asked. "Exactly," Walter said. "Page 2 is the narrative. The officer's description of the scene. It is missing from the physical file. The digital record is corrupted. He pointed to a line on page 3. Tao requested 1400 hours, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. When was the crash? I asked. The 911 call came in at 2:18. Walter said, I stared at the numbers. They called the tow truck 18 minutes before I hit the pole? Unless the tow truck driver is psychic. Walter said, someone manipulated the log, or the timestamp is wrong. But police logs are automated. They do not just drift. He flipped to another page. And the dash cam. There is a gas station right at that intersection, the Sunoco. I went there. I asked the manager if the police pulled their footage. And? He said a private investigator picked it up the day after the crash. A man claiming to represent your insurance company. But when I called your insurance adjuster this morning, they said they never sent anyone to the scene. They are making their decision based on the police report. So who took the footage? Walter looked at me. I think we both know the answer to that. I needed to go back to work. The isolation was killing me. The silence in the house, broken only by my mother's voicemail looping in my head, was worse than the pain. I needed to feel useful. I needed to remember who Haley Gray was before she became a case number. I took a rideshare to Northline Creative on a Thursday morning. I was not cleared to drive, and my car was a crumpled cube of metal in a junkyard somewhere. Walking into the office felt like stepping onto a different planet. The air conditioning was freezing. The phones were ringing. People were rushing past with coffee cups and tablets. When I hobbled through the glass doors, the room went quiet, not silent, but the volume dropped, heads turned, eyes darted to my cane, then to my leg brace, then quickly away. Hey, Sarah popped up from her cubicle. She looked genuinely happy to see me, but her smile was tight. Oh my gosh, you made it in. I'm back, I said, trying to sound cheerful. My boss, David, came out of his office. He was a man who wore expensive sneakers with suits and used words like synergy and verticality. Haley, he said, coming over but stopping 3 feet away. We didn't expect you until next week. I wanted to get a head start. I said, I am going stir-crazy at home. Right. David nodded. Let's chat in my office. I followed him. The walk seemed to take forever. He closed the door. He did not offer me coffee. So, he said, sitting behind his desk, we are thrilled you are recovering. Really, but we need to talk about the realities of the workload. I can work. David, I can't run a marathon, but my hands are fine. My brain is fine. Of course, but the client needs reliability. He slid a document across the desk. It was titled, Compassionate Performance Plan. What is this? I asked. It is a framework, David said, to help you transition back. We have outlined some benchmarks. I read the first page. Employee must maintain 100% in-office availability during core hours. Employee must complete all backlog from the Tech Start project within 14 days. Employee must submit to weekly capability assessments. David, I said, I have physical therapy 3 times a week. I can't be in the office 100% of the time. And the Tech Start backlog, that is a month of work. You want me to do it in 2 weeks? We are a high-performance team. Haley, David said, his voice dropping to that reasonable, pitying tone that made me want to scream. If you cannot meet the standard, we need to know. Maybe you need to take more time? Unpaid? This isn't a plan to help me, I said, realizing it as I spoke. This is a paper trail. You are setting me up to fail so you can fire me. Haley, that is a very negative interpretation. We are trying to accommodate your limitations. I stared at him. I had worked here for 4 years. I had stayed late. I had come in on weekends. I signed the paper because I didn't know what else to do. I needed the health insurance. I went back to my desk. My computer was locked. I had to call IT to get my password reset. While I waited, Sarah rolled her chair over. Did he give you the plan? She whispered. I nodded. I'm sorry, she said. Sarah, I asked, keeping my voice low. Who called HR? You said someone called. She looked around. I shouldn't tell you this. Please, She leaned in close. Becky in HR. She is my gym buddy. She told me the call came in 2 days after your accident. It was anonymous. A woman. She said she was a concerned family friend. She said you had a history of prescription drug abuse, specifically opioids. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had never taken an opioid in my life until the accident. She said the caller warned us that you might try to claim disability to fund a habit. Sarah whispered. That is why they are being so hard on you. They think you are a junkie. I felt sick, a concerned family friend. There was only one person who knew exactly what prescriptions I had been given in the hospital. Only one person who would use the term family friend to mask her identity. My mother was not just hiding the truth. She was salting the earth so nothing could ever grow back. Walter did not just have a lawyer, he had people. I learned this when he brought Tess Marlowe to my house on Saturday morning. Tess was a woman who looked like she was carved out of granite. She wore a leather jacket and boots that looked like they had kicked open a few doors. She did not smile. She did not shake hands. She sat at my kitchen table and opened a laptop. Ms. Gray, Tess said, Walter hired me to look into the financial movements surrounding your mother. I nodded, feeling small in my own kitchen. Marilyn Gray is good, Tess said. She covers her tracks. But nobody is invisible. She turned the laptop screen toward me. This is a credit report for a shell company registered in Delaware. The company is called Vesta Holdings. It was incorporated 3 weeks ago. Okay, I said. The primary signatory is your mother. Tess said, but the funding source that is interesting. She clicked a key. On the Tuesday after your crash, the day Mrs. Higgins saw your mother leaving your house with the lockbox. A wire transfer was initiated from an account at Stonebridge Advisory Group. Stonebridge? I said, that sounds familiar? It should. Tess said, it is a high-risk wealth management firm. They specialize in aggressive asset protection. She pulled up a photo. It was a grainy picture taken from a distance. It showed my mother, wearing sunglasses, sitting at a cafe table with a man. Do you know this man? Tess asked. I squinted. He was handsome, in a slick, oily way. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car. No, I said. His name is Grant Holloway, Tess said. He is a consultant for Stonebridge. He handles their difficult clients. Your mother met with him the morning of your accident. The morning of? I asked. Before the crash? 4 hours before. Tess said. Walter leaned forward. Why would Marilyn need a fixer 4 hours before you hit a pole? He asked. I don't know, I said. Maybe it's a coincidence. Tess snorted. I don't believe in coincidences. She said, I believe in patterns. And the pattern here is that your mother was preparing for a financial crisis before the crisis happened. She tapped the screen, and there is something else. That new account at Stonebridge? The one she funded with the wire transfer? Yes? She listed you as a beneficiary. Tess said. I frowned. Well, that is good, isn't it? Tess looked at me with eyes that had seen too much of the world. She listed you as a dependent with diminished capacity. It is a specific designation. It allows the account holder to bypass certain tax penalties if the money is used for custodial care. Custodial care? I repeated. It means she is telling the government she expects you to be an invalid. Haley, she is betting against your recovery. The final blow came in the mail on a Tuesday. I had been fighting through the days, going to work, enduring the silent treatment from David, doing my physical therapy exercises until I was sweating and crying on the floor. I was determined to prove them wrong. I was determined to walk without the cane. I opened the envelope from my health insurance provider. Explanation of benefits. Denied. I scanned the page. It was for the nerve block procedure my doctor had scheduled for the following week. It was the procedure that was supposed to stop the burning fire in my hip and let me sleep for more than 2 hours at a time. Reason for denial. Service determined to be not medically necessary. I stared at the words. Not medically necessary. My doctor had written a 3-page letter explaining why it was crucial. I called the number on the back of the card. I waited on hold for 40 minutes. Finally, a representative answered. I'm looking at the file. Ms. Gray, the woman said, sounding bored. The denial was based on a peer review. What peer review? I asked. An external consultant reviewed your records. They noted that the patient has a history of, let me see here, non-compliance with physical therapy and potential substance-seeking behavior. Therefore, interventional pain management is not recommended. I dropped the phone. Non-compliance, substance-seeking, the rumors, the lies. They had migrated from my office to my medical file. Walter was in the kitchen, making tea. He saw me drop the phone. He saw the color leave my face. What happened? He asked. They denied the surgery. I said, my voice sounded hollow. They think I'm a junkie. Grandpa. They think I'm faking it. Walter picked up the letter. He read it once. Then he read it again. He placed it on the table, very gently. This is not an insurance error, he said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. What do you mean? Insurance companies are cheap, he said, but they are not creative. They do not invent stories about substance abuse unless someone feeds them the data. He looked at me. Your mother met with Grant Holloway. Grant Holloway specializes in risk management. He walked over to me and put his hands on my shoulders. His grip was surprisingly strong. This is coordinated. Haley, your mother isn't just gone. She is moving pieces. She is cutting off your income. She is destroying your reputation. She is blocking your medical care. Why? I cried. Why would she do this? Because she needs you weak, Walter said. She needs you to be the invalid she claimed you were on that account. If you recover, if you get strong, you might start asking questions about what really happened that day. He looked into my eyes. We are not just fighting for your leg anymore, kid. We are fighting for your life, and I think it is time we stopped playing defense. He went to the table and picked up his phone. He dialed a number. Tess, he said, it's Walter. Find out everything you can about Grant Holloway, and get me the name of the mechanic who signed off on Haley's car inspection. We are going to war. I drove a rental car to the distinctive glass tower of the Meridian condominiums on a gray Wednesday morning. My own car was gone, crushed into a cube of scrap metal, and with it, the physical evidence of the day my life split in two. The rental was a compact sedan that smelled of synthetic vanilla, and every bump in the road sent a jolt of electricity shooting from my hip down to my ankle. I was not supposed to be driving. The denial letter from the insurance company regarding my nerve block procedure meant I was managing my pain with over-the-counter anti-inflammatories and a stubborn refusal to accept reality. But I could not sit in my duplex anymore, waiting for emails that never came and phone calls that went to voicemail. I parked in the visitor lot. The Meridian was where my mother lived. It was a place of beige carpets, hushed hallways, and a front desk concierge named Robert, who wore a blazer that cost more than my first car. I hobbled through the automatic doors, my cane clicking sharply against the marble floor. Robert looked up, his professional smile faltering for a fraction of a second when he saw the brace on my leg and the dark circles under my eyes. Good morning, Ms. Gray, he said. I can ring up to your mother. Please do, I said. He picked up the phone, spoke in a hushed tone, and then hung up. Mrs. Gray will meet you in the lobby, he said. She asked that you wait by the fountain. Of course she did. She would not let me up to the apartment. The apartment was her sanctuary, a place of white sofas and glass tables where messes were not allowed. And right now, I was a mess. I sat on a bench near the decorative waterfall, the gentle rushing sound doing nothing to calm the pounding in my chest. 10 minutes later, the elevator doors slid open and Marilyn Gray stepped out. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. Her hair was a smooth golden helmet. She walked with the easy grace of a woman who had never known physical pain, scanning the lobby to ensure no one of importance was witnessing this meeting. She stopped 3 feet away from me. She did not hug me. She did not sit down. Haley, she said, you look tired. I stood up. It was a slow, agonizing process. I had to plant the cane, shift my weight, and grit my teeth against the spasm in my lower back. I wanted her to see it. I wanted her to see the sweat that broke out on my forehead just from the effort of standing. I am tired. Mom, I said, I am tired of my insurance company telling me I am a drug addict. I am tired of my job trying to fire me. And I am tired of wondering why my mother stole my savings and vanished. Marilyn's expression tightened. She took a half step back, her eyes darting to the concierge desk. Lower your voice, she hissed. We are not doing this here. Then where are we doing it? I asked, my voice rising despite her warning. You won't answer my calls. You won't answer Grandpa. You took the lockbox from my house while I was in the hospital. I secured your valuables, Marilyn said, her tone icy. You were incapacitated. You were rambling about conspiracies and pain medication. I did what any responsible parent would do. I protected your assets from your own instability. Instability? I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. You emptied my emergency fund. You told the bank I was incompetent. I told the bank the truth, she said, that you have a history of making poor decisions under pressure, and looking at you now, dragging yourself here, making a scene. It seems I was right. I felt tears pricking my eyes, hot and humiliating. Why are you doing this? I asked. I am your daughter. I got hurt. I needed you. Marilyn sighed. It was a sound of profound exhaustion, as if my existence was a burden she had carried for too long. I could not watch it. Haley, she said, I could not sit there and watch you become dependent. I could not watch you turn into a victim. It is suffocating. You have always been fragile, emotionally. And this accident? It was going to pull you under. I had to separate myself. For my own preservation. Self-preservation? I stared at her. You abandoned me because you didn't want to deal with the hassle? I stepped back because you need to learn to swim, she said. And frankly, your grandfather is not helping. He is poisoning you against me. He is filling your head with paranoid nonsense about investigations and trusts. I watched her hands. She was clutching her phone in her left hand. When she said Walter's name, her grip tightened so hard that her knuckles turned white. The phone vibrated against her palm, and I saw a distinct tremor run through her fingers. It was not anger. I knew my mother's anger. It was cold and still. This was shaking. This was fear. Grandpa isn't poisoning me, I said quietly. He is the only one asking why the police report is missing a page. He is the only one asking why you were meeting with a crisis manager at Stonebridge 4 hours before I crashed. The tremor in her hand became a visible shake. She shoved the phone into her pocket and crossed her arms, hiding the reaction. Walter is a senile old man who loves to play general. She said, he ruined your father, and now he wants to ruin me. If you are smart, Haley, you will stop signing his papers and start listening to the people who are actually trying to manage your future. She looked at her watch. I have a lunch meeting, she said. Go home, take a shower, and stop listening to ghost stories. She turned and walked back toward the elevators. She did not look back. I stood by the fountain, listening to the water cycle endlessly over the polished stones, and realized that my mother was not just cruel. She was terrified. I drove straight to Walter's house. It was a small bungalow on the other side of town, filled with books and the smell of pipe tobacco. Tess Marlowe was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of printouts. Walter looked up when I came in. He saw the set of my jaw. You saw her, he said. It was not a question. I saw her. I said, sinking into a chair. She said she left me for self-preservation. She said I was fragile. Walter poured a cup of coffee and slid it toward me. She is projecting, he said. Marilyn has always despised weakness because she feels it so acutely in herself. He sat down opposite me. Did you notice anything? He asked. Her hands. I said, when I mentioned you. She shook. She looked like she was going to drop her phone. She is scared of you. Grandpa? She should be, Tess said from the corner. Tess spun her laptop around so I could see the screen. It displayed a phone log. I pulled your mother's call records. Tess said, don't ask me how. Just look at the dates. I scanned the list. It was a series of calls made the week of my accident. Most were to her office, or to the contractor handling her kitchen renovation, but there were 4 calls highlighted in yellow. Brightwell Recovery Center. I read, what is that? It is a private addiction treatment facility in Vermont, Tess said. Very high-end, very discreet. I looked at the dates. The first call was on the Monday before my accident. The second was the morning of the crash. The third and fourth were while I was in the hospital. Why was she calling a rehab center? I asked. Does she have a problem? Tess shook her head. I called them. She said, I pretended to be an intake coordinator from a partner facility. I asked if they had any files on a Marilyn Gray. They didn't. But then I asked if she had inquired about a patient. She looked at me. She called to ask about their intake protocols for involuntary commitment, and she specifically asked about their policy on records removal and absolute discretion for family members of high-profile clients. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. She was asking about committing someone? I asked, Who? You. Haley, Walter said softly. Me? But I don't have a problem. I have never been to rehab. I drink a glass of wine on Fridays. Why would she call them? To create a trail, Walter said. He stood up and walked to the window. Think about it. If she wants to control your finances, if she wants to discredit anything you say about the accident, what is the best way to do it? She plants the seed that you are unstable. She calls a facility and asks questions. She creates a record of concern. So if anyone investigates later, she can say, Oh, I have been worried about Haley for months. I even called Brightwell to get her help. I stared at the phone log. It was monstrous. It was a calculated, preemptive strike against my credibility. She was setting me up, I whispered, before I even crashed. Walter turned back to face me. His face was grim. There is something you need to know, Haley, about your mother, and about why I have leverage over her. I waited, 20 years ago. Walter said, when you were just a teenager. Marilyn was working for a boutique investment firm in Boston. She was ambitious, too ambitious. She authorized a series of trades that were, let us say, unauthorized. She was trying to cover a loss she had made on a personal investment. I never knew that. I said, no one did. Walter said, because I fixed it. He sat down again, his movements heavy. The firm found out. They were going to go to the police. It would have been grand larceny. She would have gone to prison. Haley, you would have been put in foster care. He rubbed his temples. She came to me. She was hysterical. She begged me to save her, so I did. I liquidated a significant portion of my retirement. I paid the firm back, every cent, plus interest, and I signed an agreement with them to keep it quiet, a non-disclosure agreement. And Mom? I asked. She kept her freedom, Walter said, but she lost her license to trade. That is why she went into real estate. It was the only industry that wouldn't check the regulatory databases deep enough to find the sealed record. He looked at me with sad eyes. For 20 years, she has been terrified that the truth would come out. She has built this persona, the perfect, successful, untouchable Marilyn Gray, to hide the fact that she is a fraud. She manages appearances because if the cracks show, the whole facade comes down. And now? I asked. And now? Walter said, you are the crack, your accident, the police investigation, the insurance inquiries. It all invites scrutiny, scrutiny she cannot survive. If they look too closely at her finances to see where your money went, they might find the old skeletons, so she is burying me to keep the attention off herself. I said, it was not a question. It was a realization that settled in my stomach like lead. Yes, Walter said, and that is why we are going to force her hand. The next week was a blur of pain and frustration. I returned to Northline Creative determined to prove David and the HR department wrong. I arrived at 8 in the morning. I sat at my desk, my leg propped up on a cardboard box I had dragged from the supply closet because they hadn't provided a footrest. I worked on the backlog. I redesigned 3 logos, drafted a 50-page brand strategy document, and answered every email within 5 minutes. I refused to take lunch breaks. I refused to let them see me wince when I stood up. But the body keeps the score. By Thursday afternoon, the pain in my hip was blinding. It felt like someone was driving a hot nail into the joint every time I shifted my weight. I was sweating through my blouse. My vision was blurring at the edges. I was in the middle of a presentation to the creative director when my leg gave out. I didn't fall, exactly. I just crumpled. I caught myself on the edge of the conference table, gasping, the cane clattering to the floor with a sound like a gunshot. "Haley?" David asked. Standing up. "I am fine," I gasped, trying to pull myself up, just a spasm. "You are white as a sheet," Sarah said, rushing over. "I am fine," I snapped, the pain making me vicious. "I just need a minute." I didn't get a minute. David ended the meeting. He looked at me with that same mixture of pity and annoyance my mother had shown. "Go home, Haley," he said. "We will finish this when you are capable." I drove home in a rage of humiliation. I had tried to be strong. I had tried to be the Haley they knew. But that Haley was gone. The new Haley was broken, and no amount of willpower could fix bone and nerve damage that was being denied treatment. I collapsed onto my sofa and cried until my throat was raw. I wanted to give up. I wanted to call my mother and apologize. I wanted to sign whatever papers she wanted just to make the pain stop. But then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tess. "Check your email. Now." I wiped my eyes and opened my laptop. There was an email from Tess with an attachment. Subject: Ridgeway Auto Service Record. I opened the PDF. It was a scanned copy of a work order from Ridgeway Auto Tire. Vehicle: 2018 Honda Accord. My car. Date: January 12th, 2 days before the accident. Service performed. Brake system inspection. Fluid flush. Caliper adjustment. I stared at the screen. I had not taken my car to Ridgeway Auto on January 12th. I had been at work all day. I remembered that day specifically because it was Sarah's birthday and we had ordered cupcakes. I looked at the payment section. Paid by Visa, ending in 8890. That was not my card. That was not my mother's card. I called Tess. I didn't take my car in. I said without a preamble, "I was at work." "I know." Tess said, "I pulled the security footage from the garage. It wasn't you driving the car. Who was it?" "A man." Tess said, "Baseball cap, sunglasses, hard to ID, but he dropped the car off at 9 in the morning and picked it up at 5. "But how did he get my keys?" I asked. "How did he get my car?" "Check your calendar," Tess said. "Your digital calendar, the one synced to your phone." I switched tabs to my calendar app. I scrolled back to January 12th. It was empty, except for the note about Sarah's birthday. "Check the trash," Tess said. "The deleted items." I went to the deleted folder. There, nestled among the spam invites and canceled meetings, was an entry for January 12th, 9 a.m., vehicle service/Ridgeway. I clicked on the metadata. Created by Haley Gray. Deleted January 15th, the day after the accident. "I didn't create this," I whispered. "Someone with access to your account did." Tess said, "Someone who wanted it to look like you scheduled maintenance. Someone who wanted to create a record that the car was serviced right before it crashed, so that when the brakes failed, no one would suspect mechanical tampering. They would blame the driver. They hacked me." I said, "Or they just knew your password." Tess said, "Think, Haley, who has your passwords? Who has your backup drive?" My mother. The lockbox. The backup drive in the lockbox. It had a text file with all my passwords. I had put it there in case I died, so my family could access my photos. She used my own safety net to trap me. The next morning, Walter made his move. He did not go to the police. He did not go to the insurance company. He went to the courthouse. I went with him. Despite the pain, I wore my best blazer and leaned on my cane like it was a scepter. We met Arthur Peake in the atrium. "Are you sure about this?" "Walter?" Arthur asked. "Once we file this, there is no going back. It is a declaration of war." Walter adjusted his fedora. "She declared war when she tried to commit my granddaughter to a rehab center." He said, "File it." Arthur walked to the clerk's window and slid a thick stack of documents under the glass. The filing was a petition for accounting and emergency trust activation. It was a legal mechanism triggered by the behavior clause in the trust. It stated that because Marilyn Gray had violated the terms of the trust by abandoning a dependent family member during a medical crisis. The trustee, Walter, was exercising his right to audit all financial activities of the beneficiary, Marilyn, to determine if family assets were being misappropriated. In plain English, Walter was forcing her to show her books, all of them, the trust, her personal accounts, her business accounts, everything connected to the Gray family legacy. "If she is hiding money," Walter said as we walked out into the bright winter sun, "this will find it. And if she is paying off people, like the man at Ridgeway Auto, or the fixer from Stonebridge, this will expose it." It felt like a victory. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we were on the offensive, but Marilyn was not a woman who went down without a fight. 3 days later, a courier arrived at Walter's bungalow. He handed a thick envelope to my grandfather. Walter opened it in the kitchen. He read the cover letter, his face remaining impassive. Then he handed it to me. It was from a law firm in the city, a firm known for scorched earth litigation. "Dear Mr. Gray, we represent Marilyn Gray. We are in receipt of your vexatious filing regarding the family trust. Please be advised that our client views this action as a continuation of a long-standing pattern of coercive control and financial abuse perpetrated by you against her. Ms. Gray maintains that your attempt to leverage a behavior clause is a pretext for harassment. Furthermore, we are prepared to submit evidence that you are unduly influencing Haley Gray, a vulnerable adult currently suffering from cognitive distress due to trauma and medication, to participate in this scheme, unless the petition is withdrawn within 48 hours. We will file a countersuit seeking your removal as trustee and a restraining order to prevent further contact with our client." I lowered the letter. "Coercive control?" I said. "Financial abuse? She is accusing you of what she is doing to me." "It is called DARVO," Walter said calmly. "Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. It is a classic manipulation tactic." He took the letter back and tossed it onto the table. "She is trying to paint me as the villain," he said. "She wants to make a judge believe that I am the abuser and she is the victim protecting her daughter. But it's a lie." I cried. "It is a story." Walter said, "And in a courtroom, the best story wins." He looked at me. His blue eyes were hard, but not unkind. "She is terrified. Haley, this letter proves it. If she wasn't hiding something, she would just open the books and prove me wrong. The fact that she is threatening a restraining order means she cannot afford to let anyone see those accounts." He poured himself a fresh cup of coffee. "She thinks she can scare us off with big words and expensive lawyers," he said. "She thinks we will back down to avoid a scandal." "Will we?" I asked. Walter took a sip of his coffee. "I am 78 years old," he said. "I have lived through a war, 2 recessions, and the death of my wife. I do not fear scandal. I fear leaving you alone with a wolf who looks like your mother." He reached for the phone. "Call Tess," he said. "Tell her to find out who the man in the baseball cap was, and tell Arthur to schedule a deposition. If Marilyn wants a fight, we will give her one. But we are going to do it on the record." I looked at the letter on the table, the legal threats, the accusations, the twisted reality. I realized then that my mother was gone. The woman who had raised me, however imperfectly, had been replaced by a creature of pure survival instinct. And if I wanted to survive her, I had to stop being her daughter. I had to become her enemy. I picked up my phone and dialed Tess. "Tess," I said when she answered, "It's Haley. We need to find the man at the garage. I am already on it." Tess said, "And Haley?" "Yeah?" "I found something else. The credit card that paid for the service at Ridgeway. The one ending in 8890. "What about it?" "It is a corporate card." Tess said, "Registered to a nonprofit called North Pine Community Foundation." "North Pine?" I said, "I have never heard of them. You might want to ask your boss." Tess said, "Because North Pine is the parent company that owns the building where Northline Creative rents its office." My stomach dropped. The web was bigger than I thought. It wasn't just my mother. It was my workplace. It was the garage. It was the money. It was all connected. and we were just starting to pull the string. The meeting at Northline Creative was scheduled for 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. I arrived 15 minutes early, my stomach churning with a mix of anxiety and the lingering nausea from my pain medication. The office was buzzing with the usual low-level hum of productivity, keyboards clacking, phones ringing, the espresso machine hissing in the break room. But as I walked past the glass-walled conference room, I saw heads turn. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Eyes darted to my leg brace, then quickly away, as if looking at me directly would be an admission of guilt. David was waiting for me in his office, along with Becky from HR. Becky was a woman I had known for 3 years. We had shared photos of our cats. We had complained about the coffee. Now, she sat with her hands folded on a stack of documents, refusing to meet my gaze. "Haley," David began, his voice pitched in that smooth corporate baritone that was designed to deliver bad news as if it were an opportunity. "We have been reviewing the situation, the project timelines, the client needs, and your current capacity." He slid a thick envelope across the desk. "We feel it is best for everyone if we facilitate a transition," he said. I looked at the envelope. It was heavy. "You are firing me?" I asked. "We are offering a separation agreement," Becky said quickly. "It is very generous. It includes 3 months of severance pay, continued health coverage for the remainder of the quarter, and positive references." I opened the envelope. The numbers were indeed generous. 3 months of salary would cover my rent and my therapy bills for a while. But then my eyes caught the bold text on page 4, non-disparagement and confidentiality. I read the paragraph. It was dense with legalese, but the meaning was clear. By signing this, I agreed never to make any negative statements about Northline Creative, its employees, or its affiliates. I agreed to waive any claims regarding workplace accommodations or discrimination, and, most chillingly, I agreed to keep the terms of my departure and any events leading up to it strictly confidential. "This isn't just a standard clause," I said, looking up. "This is a gag order. It is standard for senior roles," David said, shifting in his seat. "I am not a senior executive. David, I am a graphic designer. Why do you need me to promise I won't talk about events leading up to my departure?" Becky cleared her throat. "Given the sensitive nature of the reports we received regarding your conduct, you mean the anonymous call?" I cut in. "The one claiming I was a drug addict. We have a duty to protect the company culture," Becky said, her voice tight. "This agreement protects you too. Haley, it ensures that the investigation remains sealed. If you sign this, we wipe the HR record clean. No mention of substance abuse allegations, just a clean break." I stared at them. They were not firing me because I couldn't do the job. They were buying my silence. They wanted to make sure I never asked who made that call, or why my medical history had been weaponized against me. And they wanted to ensure I never dug deeper into the fact that our landlord, the North Pine Community Foundation, might be connected to the people who were servicing my car. "I need to have my lawyer review this," I said. David's smile faltered. "The offer expires in 48 hours. Haley, I would suggest you take it. It is a lifeline." I stood up, gripping my cane until my knuckles turned white. "It is not a lifeline. David, it is hush money." I walked out of the office, leaving the envelope on the desk. The silence that followed me to the elevator was deafening. I drove straight to Walter's bungalow. The anger I felt was different now. It was cold. It was clarifying. I wasn't confused anymore. I was calculating. Tess Marlowe was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with Walter. The air in the room was thick with tension. Tess had her laptop open, and she was speaking rapidly into her phone in a low voice. She hung up as I limped into the room. "They offered me a severance package," I said, dropping my bag onto the floor, "with a non-disparagement clause that covers everything short of the weather." Walter nodded grimly. "I expected that," he said. "They are circling the wagons." Tess turned her laptop toward me, and I know why they are scared. She said, "I traced the call." "The call to HR?" "Yes. It came from a burner phone. Tess said. Prepaid. Bought with cash at a convenience store in the city. Usually, that is a dead end. But this person made a mistake. They kept the phone on. She tapped the map on her screen. I pinged the location history. The phone spent 8 hours a day, for 3 days leading up to the call, at a single address. I leaned in. The red pin was hovering over a sleek office building in the financial district. Stonebridge Advisory Group. I read, "Wait," I said, "that is the firm Mom is using. That is where Grant Holloway works." "Exactly," Tess said. "And the specific office the signal came from?" "The front reception desk on the 14th floor." "The receptionist?" I asked, "or someone standing near the receptionist?" Tess said, "I called the main line at Stonebridge 10 minutes ago. I asked to speak to Grant Holloway's assistant. A woman named Jessica answered. Her voice is a perfect match for the recording of the anonymous caller that Becky at your office played for me, after I threatened her with a subpoena." I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother didn't just have a friend call. She had her financial fixer's assistant do it. Walter leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "This confirms it. Haley," he said. "This wasn't petty gossip. This was a professional hit on your credibility." "But why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why go to such lengths to make me look like an addict? Just to control my bank account? It seems excessive." Walter looked at me with a heavy sadness in his eyes. "It is not just about the bank account you have now," he said. "It is about the money you might have later." "What money?" "The settlement," Walter said. I frowned. "What settlement?" "Haley, if that accident wasn't your fault, if it was mechanical failure or negligence, you could be entitled to a significant payout. Insurance, manufacturer liability, personal injury. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more." He paused, letting the number sink in. "If you are declared incompetent, or if you are painted as an addict who needs a conservator, who controls that money?" "Marilyn." I whispered. "She controls the payout," Walter said. "She manages the trust. She decides how much you get for allowance and how much gets invested in funds she controls. Funds managed by Stonebridge." I felt sick. It was so cold, so calculated. She wasn't just hiding her past crimes. She was banking on my future pain. "She is betting against me." I said, "She is short-selling her own daughter." Walter nodded. "And that is why we need to prove the accident wasn't your fault. We need to prove the car failed." The next morning, I went to Ridgeway Auto Tire. It was a gray, overcast day, the kind where the sky looks like dirty concrete. Ridgeway Auto was a sprawling complex on the edge of town, smelling of oil, rubber, and stale coffee. I parked my rental car and walked into the service office. The manager, a man named Carl, with grease under his fingernails and a name tag that hung crookedly on his shirt, looked up from his computer. "Can I help you?" he asked, not unkindly. "I am Haley Gray." I said, "My car was serviced here on January 12th. A black Honda Accord." Carl's face went blank. It was instantaneous, like a shutter closing. "Gray," he muttered, typing slowly. "Honda Accord. Right." He stared at the screen for a long time. "I am sorry, Ms. Gray," he said finally. "I don't see any record of that vehicle in our system." "I have the work order," I said, pulling the printout Tess had found in my deleted emails. "I have the credit card receipt." Carl didn't look at the paper. "We did a system migration last week," he said. "A lot of old files got corrupted, lost in the cloud. You know? If it is not in the active database, I can't help you. It was 2 weeks ago." "Carl, that is not an old file. System migration," he repeated, his voice harder now. "It happens. Nothing I can do." He turned back to his screen, dismissing me. I stood there for a moment, trembling with rage. Then I turned and walked out. I went around the side of the building, toward the service bays. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe just a sense of the place. Maybe a clue. "Hey," the voice was a whisper. I turned. A young mechanic, maybe 20 years old, was standing by a stack of tires. He was wiping his hands on a rag, looking nervously toward the office. "You are the lady with the Accord, right?" he asked. "The one that got towed?" "Yes," I said. "That was me. I worked on that car," he said, his voice barely audible over the sound of a pneumatic drill in the next bay. "You did?" I stepped closer. "What did you do to it?" "The manager. He told me it was a quick swap." The kid said, "He wouldn't look me in the eye. He said the customer wanted the performance pads taken off and the stock ones put back on. But the parts he gave me, they were old. They looked like they came off a scrap heap." "Old parts?" I asked. "On a brake job?" He nodded. I told him they looked worn. He told me to just install them and shut up. He said the customer was cheap and didn't want to pay for new steel. He glanced at the office door again. "I didn't know you were going to crash." "Lady, I swear, I just did what I was told." "Who brought the car in?" I asked. "Was it a man?" "Yeah. Guy in a baseball cap. Sunglasses. Didn't say much. Just dropped the keys and left." The mechanic took a step back. "I can't talk to you. I need this job. But you check the caliper bolts. If you still have the wreck, check the bolts. I bet they are stripped." He turned and disappeared back into the dark garage. I stood there, the smell of exhaust fumes choking me. And suddenly, I was back in the car. Flashback. January 14th, 2:18 in the afternoon. I am driving past the reservoir. The sun is bright. I am listening to a podcast about architecture. I see the curve coming up. I lift my foot off the gas. I press the brake pedal. And then, nothing. No resistance. No friction. Just a soft, spongy surrender as the pedal hits the floor mat. I pump it. Once, twice. The smell hits me first. Not burning rubber, burning metal. The sharp, acrid scent of steel grinding on steel. The car accelerates. The weight of it shifts as I hit the gravel shoulder. The panic is cold water in my veins. It wasn't me. The realization hit me with the force of the impact itself. I hadn't been speeding. I hadn't been distracted. I hadn't been reckless. I had been fighting a machine that had been sabotaged. Someone had replaced my brakes with garbage. Someone had sent me out onto the road in a death trap, and my mother had paid the bill. I drove home in a daze. I sat in my living room with the lights off. Staring at the wall, I felt hollowed out. Betrayal is one thing, theft is one thing, but this was physical. This was violence. The doorbell rang at 7 in the evening. I knew who it was before I opened it. I could feel her presence on the other side of the wood. A vibration of nervous energy. I opened the door. Marilyn stood there. She was holding a large gift basket wrapped in cellophane, filled with expensive cheeses and fruit. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Her hair was slightly less perfect than usual. "Haley," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't move out of the doorway. "What do you want? Mom?" She pushed past me, forcing me to step back or be hit with the basket. She set it on the coffee table and turned to me, her face crumbling into a mask of grief. "I brought you some things," she said. "I know you like the aged cheddar from the market, and I brought some vitamins, the high-quality ones." I stared at the basket. It was absurd. It was a bribe wrapped in a bow. "I don't want cheese. Mom, I want to know why you paid for a brake job on my car 2 days before I crashed." Marilyn froze. The tears stopped instantly, replaced by a flash of genuine panic. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "I went to Ridgeway Auto. I spoke to the mechanic. He told me about the swap. He told me about the old parts." Marilyn's face hardened. "You are hysterical," she said. "You are listening to grease monkeys and senile old men. I never went to that garage." "No," I said. "You didn't. You sent a man." "A man from Stonebridge? Or maybe someone from North Pine?" "Stop it," she snapped. She walked over to me, reaching out to touch my arm. I flinched away. "Haley, please," she said, her voice switching back to the pleading tone. "I am trying to help you. I am trying to protect you. You don't know what is happening. You don't know the pressure I am under." "What pressure?" I asked. "The pressure of hiding your past? The pressure of keeping your money safe while I almost died?" Marilyn's face twisted. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was ugly. Raw anger. "You ungrateful child," she hissed. "You think this is about money? You think I care about the trust fund? I have been holding up the sky for 30 years. I have been keeping this family's name clean while your grandfather plays the saint." She stepped closer, invading my space. "I did everything for you. I made sure you went to the right schools. I made sure you had the right job. And when you messed up, when you got into that car, I tried to clean it up." "Clean it up?" I screamed back. "You erased the police report. You stole my hard drive. You tried to commit me to a psych ward. I was protecting you," she shrieked. "From what?" I yelled. "From the truth? You don't understand what I was protecting you from." The words hung in the air, vibrating in the silence that followed. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving, her eyes were wide, wild, realizing she had said too much. "Protecting me from what?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Marilyn stared at me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at the door. She looked at the gift basket on the table. She straightened her jacket. She smoothed her hair. She pulled the mask back on, but it was cracked now. I could see the terror underneath. "You will understand when it is over," she said coldly. "And you will thank me." She turned and walked out the door. She didn't look back. She got into her pristine SUV and drove away, leaving me standing in the wreckage of our relationship. My phone rang 10 minutes later. It was Walter. "Come over," he said. His voice was shaking. "I found something." I drove to his house, my hands trembling on the wheel. When I got there, Walter was sitting on the floor of his study, surrounded by old boxes. Dust motes danced in the light of the desk lamp. He was holding a yellowed envelope. "I went through the storage unit," he said, "the one I haven't opened since your grandmother died. I knew I kept a copy. I knew it." He handed me the envelope. It was labeled, "Marilyn, 1998, CVMCU. "What is this?" I asked. "Open it," he said. I pulled out a document. It was typed on thick, legal paper. "Confidential restitution and non-prosecution agreement. Parties: Cedar Vale Municipal Credit Union and Marilyn J. Gray." I read the preamble. It detailed a series of unauthorized withdrawals and ledger manipulations totaling $40,000. It stated that the undersigned, Marilyn, agreed to repay the full amount, plus penalties, in exchange for the credit union declining to press criminal charges. "This is the scandal?" I asked. "The one you paid for?" "Read the witness list." Walter said, "On the last page." I flipped to the back. "Witnessed by Arthur Peake, attorney at law; Robert Vance, loan officer; Samuel D. Risley, branch manager." I looked up. "I don't know these names, except Arthur." "Look at the third name," Walter said. "Samuel Risley. Okay, who is he?" "I did a search on him while you were driving over," Walter said. "He left the banking industry 2 years after this was signed. He had some ethical issues of his own. And he bought a franchise," Walter said. "A franchise that relies on cash flow and high turnover." He turned his laptop screen toward me. "Risley Automotive Group. Owner, Samuel D. Risley. Doing business as Ridgeway Auto Tire." I felt the room spin. The man who runs the garage where my car was sabotaged, is the same man who witnessed my mother's confession 25 years ago. "He isn't just a witness," Walter said grimly. "He is a partner, a silent partner in her secrets." He took the document from my hand. "She didn't just pick a random mechanic. Haley. She went to someone she owned, or maybe someone who owns her." Walter stood up, his knees cracking. He looked old, tired, but fierce. "Your accident wasn't just an insurance scam," he said, "and it wasn't just about controlling you. It was about cleaning up a loose end." "What loose end?" I asked. "I don't know yet," Walter said, "but if Samuel Risley is involved, it means the old debt wasn't fully paid. Or maybe she started borrowing from him again." He looked at the yellowed paper. "She said she was protecting you, didn't she?" "Yes," I whispered. Walter shook his head. "She wasn't protecting you from the world, Haley. She was protecting you from her own history. and she was willing to break your legs to keep you from walking into it. He placed the document on the desk. "We have the link," he said. "We have the motive. Now we just need the proof." He picked up the phone. "I am calling Arthur. We are going to subpoena Samuel Risley, and we are going to ask him exactly what kind of favor Marilyn Gray called in on January 12th. I looked at the document, at my mother's signature in blue ink. It was elegant, looping, and confident. The signature of a woman who thought she could write her own reality. But the ink was fading, and the paper was brittle. Everything she had built was rotting from the inside out, and I was the one who was going to tear it down. The box from Stonebridge Advisory Group arrived on a rainy Thursday, carried by a courier who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. It was a heavy banker's box, sealed with tamper-evident tape that gleamed aggressively under my kitchen lights. Walter cut the tape with a pocket knife. His hands were steady, but his breathing was audible, a rasping sound that had become more pronounced over the last week. Tess sat at the table, her laptop open, ready to digitize whatever we found. We spent 3 hours sorting through the paper trail. It was a masterclass in obfuscation, layers of shell companies, transfers to offshore holdings, and vague consulting fees. But Stonebridge had been forced by the court order to produce internal communications regarding the Gray family trust, and that was where the facade cracked. I found the memo clipped to a quarterly performance review of my mother's portfolio. Subject: Risk Assessment / Beneficiary H. Gray. Date: January 10th. I pulled the page closer. Smoothing out the crease, client advises that beneficiary H. Gray, daughter, is exhibiting signs of professional and psychological instability. Client requests isolation of assets to prevent dissipation. Note: Beneficiary is to be classified as a financial risk factor for all future trust dispersions. Strategy: Limit liquidity. Encourage dependency on controlled medical support. I read the words again. Financial risk factor. It is one thing to be abandoned. It is a visceral, hot pain, like a slap to the face. But this was cold. This was clinical. My mother had not just left me. She had categorized me. To her, I was not a daughter struggling with trauma. I was a liability on a spreadsheet, a red line item that needed to be managed, mitigated, and neutralized. I felt a scream building in my chest. I wanted to take a picture of this document and post it on every social media platform I had. I wanted to tag her real estate firm. I wanted to burn her reputation to the ground with the fire of my own humiliation. "Haley," Walter said softly. I looked up. My hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. "She planned this," I whispered. "She wrote me off before I even got in the car." "Encourage dependency." That is what she said. She wanted me crippled. She wanted me needing her money so she could control me. "Don't post it," Tess said, reading my mind. I slammed the paper down. Why not? Why shouldn't I let the world know who she really is? Because that is what a chaotic person would do. Walter said, "That is what a financial risk factor would do. You lash out. She wins. She points to your anger and says, 'See? She is unstable.'" He reached across the table and covered my hand with his own. His skin was paper thin, cold to the touch. "We do not scream. Haley, we document, we gather, and then we strike with precision." I took a deep breath, forcing the scream back down into the pit of my stomach where it could burn slowly, fueling me. "Okay," I said. "Okay. What else is there?" Tess slid a sheet of paper toward me. I cross-referenced the names in these files with the old restitution agreement Walter showed us, she said, and I ran them against the vendor list for Ridgeway Auto. She pointed to a name that appeared on both documents. Grant Holloway. I recognized the name. Tess had mentioned him before. The fixer. The man my mother met for coffee hours before my accident. "He is everywhere," Tess said. In 1998, he was a junior analyst at the firm that audited the credit union. He signed off on the clerical error that hid your mother's theft. Today, he is a senior consultant at Stonebridge. And look at this. She pulled up a digital invoice from Ridgeway Auto. Consulting services. G. Holloway, $5,000. Why is a fancy financial consultant billing a greasy auto shop? I asked. Because he is the bridge, Walter said. He is the one who connects the money to the muscle. He is the one who makes the problems go away. I needed to look him in the eye. It was a dangerous idea, but Walter agreed it was necessary. We needed to know how much he knew, and more importantly, we needed to see if he would slip. I set up the meeting under a false pretense. I used my old work email, which was still active despite the leave of absence, and sent a request to Stonebridge's general inquiry line, specifically asking for a consultation on rebranding high-net-worth portfolios. I hinted that I was representing a silent partner at Northline Creative. Grant Holloway took the bait, or maybe he just wanted to see if I was bluffing. We met at a coffee shop in the financial district, a place with exposed brick and espresso that cost $7. I arrived early, wearing a blazer I had bought for client pitches and maneuvering my cane with practiced ease. When Grant walked in, he didn't look like a monster. He looked like a catalog model for middle-aged success. Silver hair, expensive watch, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Haley Gray," he said, sliding into the booth opposite me. "I admit, I was surprised to see your name on my calendar. I thought you were recovering." "I am," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But bills don't pay themselves, do they?" He chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "No, they certainly do not, especially when one's mother has been forced to take protective measures." He signaled the waiter and ordered a black coffee without looking at the menu. "So," he said, leaning back, "you want to talk about branding, or do you want to talk about why your grandfather is filing nuisance lawsuits that are embarrassing your family?" "I want to talk about my car." "Grant," I said. His smile didn't waver. "A tragedy," he said. "Mechanical failure is a frightening thing." "It wasn't mechanical failure," I said. "It was a swap. Old pads, stripped bolts." I leaned forward. "And I know you know the owner of the garage. I know you billed him $5,000 last month." Grant's eyes narrowed slightly. He stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. "You are a very imaginative young woman, Haley. It is a quality that serves you well in design. But in the real world, it can be dangerous. Is that a threat? It is an observation. Families survive by agreeing on one story. Your mother understands this. She has spent 30 years curating a story that keeps you safe, fed, and employed." He took a sip of his coffee. "You think you want the truth," he said softly, "but you don't. The truth is messy. The truth is that sometimes people have to be nudged. Sometimes they have to be slowed down." "Slowed down?" I asked. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw something cold and reptilian underneath. "Nobody wanted you hurt." "Haley, not really. The goal was a soft scare, a fender bender, a moment of panic to make you realize you were overworked, to make you step away from the desk for a few weeks." My blood ran cold. "A soft scare?" I whispered. "You staged a car accident to make me take a vacation?" "To make you stop digging," he said. "Digging? Digging into what?" He checked his watch and stood up. "I think we are done here. Go home. Haley, sign the settlement your mother is going to offer. Take the money, fix your leg, and forget you ever heard the name North Pine." "North Pine?" He paused, realizing he had dropped a crumb he shouldn't have. He buttoned his jacket. "If you continue this crusade," he said, looking down at me, "the next scare won't be soft, and your grandfather won't be around forever to protect you." He walked out. I sat there, staring at his empty cup. North Pine. He hadn't mentioned the credit union. He hadn't mentioned the trust. He had mentioned North Pine, the North Pine Community Foundation. I drove home with my heart hammering against my ribs. A soft scare. They hadn't meant to kill me. They had meant to terrify me. They wanted me out of the office. They wanted me away from my computer. Why? I hobbled into my house and went straight to the closet. I pulled out the backup hard drive I had retrieved from the lockbox, the one thing my mother hadn't managed to wipe because I had hidden a second copy in a box of winter boots. I plugged it in. I searched for North Pine. Hundreds of files came up. North Pine was a client of Northline Creative. We did their annual report. We designed their event invitations. But Grant had said they wanted me to stop digging. I hadn't been digging. I was a designer. I picked fonts. I chose color palettes. Unless... I remembered the weekend before the crash. I had been working from home. I had forwarded a batch of files to my personal email so I could work on them without logging into the slow VPN. I opened my email archive. I found the forwarded message. Subject: North Pine Invoices/Q. 4. Audit Prep. Date: January 11th. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF export of billing records. At the time, I had just glanced at it to get the client codes for the invoice layout. I hadn't read the content. Now, I read it. It was a list of vendors paid by the North Pine Community Foundation for Community Outreach and Infrastructure Development. Vendor: Risley Automotive Group. Amount: $22,000. Description: Youth Mechanic Training Program. Vendor: Vesta Holdings. Amount: $45,000. Description: Real Estate Consulting. Vendor: Stonebridge Advisory. Amount: $80,000. Description: Strategic Endowment Management. I scrolled down. There were dozens of them. Payments to companies that didn't make sense for a community charity. And then I saw the big one. Vendor: M.J. Gray Associates. My mother's firm. Amount: $150,000. Description: Land Acquisition Retainer. I sat back. The room spinning. North Pine wasn't just a client. It was a slush fund. They were funneling money out of the nonprofit. My mother, Grant Holloway, the garage owner, they were all billing this foundation for vague services. And because I was the lead designer on the annual report, I had been sent the raw data file by mistake. I was supposed to get the sanitized version, but someone in accounting had slipped up and sent me the master list. If I had formatted that list into the annual report, if I had printed it, the fraud would have been public. That was why they needed the scare. That was why they needed me out of the office. They needed to get me away from the project before I realized what I was looking at. They needed to replace me with Jason, who would just paste in whatever new numbers they gave him. They crashed my car to hide embezzlement. I took the hard drive to Walter. He was sitting in his armchair, a blanket draped over his legs. He looked smaller than he had the day before. His skin had a gray, waxen pallor that frightened me. I showed him the invoices. I explained the connection. They are stealing from a charity. Grandpa. I said, North Pine is supposed to help low-income families with housing, and my mother is draining it to pay for... What? Her lifestyle? Her debts? Walter looked at the screen. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. It fits, he said quietly. Marilyn has always lived beyond her means. She needs the image of wealth to get the clients. But she needs the clients to pay for the image. It is a snake eating its own tail. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound that shook his thin frame. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his mouth. Haley, he said, sit down. I sat on the ottoman at his feet. There is a reason I made the move with the trust now. He said, a reason I didn't wait. I know. I said, because she left me. No, Walter said, that was the trigger. But the reason is that I am running out of time. I felt a lump form in my throat. What do you mean? I have congestive heart failure. Haley, stage 4. The doctors give me maybe 3 months, maybe less if I keep getting worked up about lawyers. Grandpa. No. Hush, he said gently. It is okay. I have had a long run, but I could not die leaving you trapped. He reached out and touched my cheek. If I died without fixing this, Marilyn would have become the trustee. She would have controlled everything. She would have used your inheritance to cover her debts. And she would have kept you small and scared and dependent on her for the rest of your life. She would have turned you into her accomplice without you even knowing it. Tears spilled down my face. I can't do this without you. I sobbed. I am not strong enough. You are, he said fiercely. You are the strongest one of us. You just didn't know it because you were taught to doubt your own eyes. He leaned back, exhausted. I am using my last strength to blow the doors off her fortress. Haley. But you are the one who has to walk through them. The settlement offer arrived 2 days later. It came via a courier, in a linen envelope that smelled of money. It was from my mother's lawyer. But the note attached was handwritten by Marilyn. Haley, let's end this madness. I have arranged a comprehensive care package for you. It covers everything. Please, for the sake of the family, sign this and let us move on. I read the legal document. Settlement agreement and release of all claims. The terms were staggering. My mother, or rather, the insurance policy she had likely taken out, would pay all my medical bills, past, present, and future, plus a lump sum of $200,000 for pain and suffering. It was enough money to fix my leg. It was enough to start my own design studio. It was enough to buy a house. But then I read the conditions. Condition 1. Claimant admits that the accident on January 14th was the result of driver error and waives all claims regarding mechanical defect or third-party liability. Condition 2. Claimant agrees to cease all contact with former employees of Northline Creative and Stonebridge Advisory Group. Condition 3. Claimant agrees to withdraw the petition for accounting filed by Walter Gray and to sign a statement affirming that said petition was filed under duress. Condition 4. Non-disclosure. The existence of this agreement and the North Pine invoices shall remain perpetually confidential. It wasn't an apology. It was a transaction. She was buying my history. She was buying my integrity. She was asking me to lie, to say I was a bad driver, to say my grandfather was a manipulator, and to bury the evidence of her crimes. I looked at the check attached to the front. $200,000. I thought about the pain in my hip. I thought about the fear of losing my apartment. I thought about how easy it would be to just sign it, take the money, and disappear. I looked at Walter. He was watching me. He didn't say a word. He wouldn't tell me what to do. This was the test. I picked up the pen. I remembered the financial risk factor note. I remembered the soft scare. I remembered the mechanic who was told to use old parts. I remembered my mother walking away from my hospital bed because she had a board meeting. I put the pen down. I am not signing it. I said. Walter let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. Why? He asked. Because if I sign this, I become her. I said, I become someone who sells the truth to stay comfortable. And I won't do that. Not for $200,000. Not for $2 million. I tore the check in half. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Then we finish it, Walter said. He picked up the phone and dialed Arthur Peake. Arthur, it's Walter. Prepare the final filing. He looked at me, his eyes blazing with a final, desperate energy. We are unsealing the restitution agreement, and we are submitting the North Pine invoices to the Attorney General as evidence of a pattern of racketeering. He paused, listening to Arthur on the other end. I know it will destroy her. Arthur, that is the point. She tried to kill my granddaughter to save a ledger. Now I am going to burn the ledger to save my granddaughter. He hung up. It is done, he said. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, charged silence of the split second before lightning strikes. The storm was here, and we were standing right in the center of it. The final filing was not a scream. It was a whisper that carried the weight of a guillotine blade dropping. On a Tuesday morning that smelled of rain and ozone. Walter Gray sat at his kitchen table, wearing his best suit, a charcoal wool number that hung loosely on his shrinking frame, and signed the affidavit. Arthur Peake stood beside him, looking more solemn than I had ever seen him. This is the petition to unseal, Arthur said, his voice low, specifically regarding the 1998 confidential restitution agreement between Marilyn Gray and Cedar Vale Municipal Credit Union. We are arguing that the patterns of financial coercion established in that document are directly relevant to the current mismanagement of the Gray Family Trust and the fraudulent concealment of assets involving the North Pine Community Foundation. In simple terms, Walter said, looking at me. "We are telling the court that your mother has done this before, and we are proving that the man who helped her hide it then, Samuel Risley, is the same man who owns the garage that serviced your car." He capped his pen. "Once this is filed, Haley, it becomes public record. The scandal she spent 30 years running from? It will be on the front page of the local paper by Friday." I looked at the document. It was thick, dense with legal arguments, but the heart of it was simple. Marilyn Gray was a fraud, and she had almost killed her daughter to keep that secret buried. "Do it," I said. Arthur took the papers and left. Walter sat back in his chair. Closing his eyes, he looked exhausted, his skin the color of old parchment. "Are you okay?" I asked, reaching for his hand. "I am fine," he whispered. "I am just finished." The reaction was immediate and chaotic. It started with silence. For 24 hours, nobody called, nobody emailed. It was the calm before the implosion. Then, on Thursday morning, the first domino fell. Tess Marlowe called me at 7 o'clock. "Turn on the news," she said. I didn't have a TV, so I opened my laptop. The local news site had a breaking banner. "Stonebridge Advisory Group Executive Resigns. Amidst internal audit." I clicked the link. Grant Holloway, a senior consultant at the prestigious Stonebridge Advisory Group, has stepped down effective immediately following allegations of unauthorized client handling. Sources say Holloway has left the country for undisclosed reasons. "He ran," I whispered. "He didn't just run." Tess said in my ear, "He evaporated. I tried to ping his phone. It is dead. His apartment is empty. He knew the subpoena was coming." Haley. He knew that once Walter unsealed the old agreement, his name would be toxic. "What about Stonebridge?" I asked. "They are scrambling. They issued a statement distancing themselves from him. They are calling him a rogue agent. They are going to throw him to the wolves to save the firm." And then, an hour later, the second domino fell. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Gray? This is Carl, from Ridgeway Auto, the manager, the man who had told me my records were lost in a cloud migration. What do you want?" "Carl?" I asked, my voice cold. "Look, I found the file," he said, his voice shaking. "It was misfiled. In a subfolder. We didn't mean to hide anything. We found the work order for your Honda, and the notes. You found them because my lawyer just served your boss with a fraud lawsuit, didn't you?" "I don't know anything about lawsuits." Carl stammered. I am emailing you the file now. Please, just tell your grandfather we cooperated, okay?" The email arrived 10 seconds later. I opened the attachment. It was the original service record from January 12th. Technician note: customer requested pad replacement. Parts supplied by customer. Refurbished/non-OEM. Technician advised against installation due to severe wear on provided components. Customer insisted. Waiver signed. I stared at the screen. Parts supplied by customer. My mother, or Grant Holloway acting on her behalf, had brought the bad brakes to the shop. They hadn't just asked for a cheap job. They had provided the weapon. I forwarded the file to an independent forensic mechanic Walter had hired. His name was Miller, a man who testified in court cases involving vehicular manslaughter. He called me back within the hour. I reviewed the notes. "Ms. Gray," Miller said, "this wasn't negligence. This was intentional. No certified mechanic puts pads with 80% wear on a vehicle unless they are ordered to. And looking at the caliper specs, they over-torqued the bolts. That is why they snapped. They wanted them to fail. Not immediately, but soon. It wasn't a soft scare." I whispered. "It was a time bomb. It was designed to fail under stress." Miller said, "Like panic braking, or a sudden stop. It was calculated to cause a loss of control without necessarily looking like sabotage. It is sophisticated." I hung up the phone. I felt sick. My own mother. She came to my house that night. She didn't knock. She used her key, the one I hadn't managed to take back yet. I was sitting in the living room, the lights off, watching the rain streak the windows. I heard the door open. I heard her wet shoes on the hardwood floor. Haley? I didn't turn around. I know. Mom, I said, I know about the parts. I know about Grant. I know about the credit union. She walked into the room. She looked like a ghost. Her hair was wet, plastered to her skull. She wasn't wearing a coat. She was shivering. But I didn't think it was from the cold. You don't understand, she said. Her voice was thin, brittle. I understand perfectly, I said, finally turning to look at her. You stole money from the credit union 30 years ago. Walter paid to cover it up. But you didn't stop. You started doing it again with North Pine. You used your own nonprofit clients to funnel cash. And when I accidentally downloaded the proof, you decided I needed to have an accident. It wasn't supposed to be a bad accident, she cried out, the sound startling in the quiet room. It was supposed to be a fender bender, just enough to scare you, just enough to make you take a leave of absence so I could get access to your computer and delete the file. She fell to her knees. My mother, the queen of Briar Glen, the woman who never had a hair out of place, was kneeling on my cheap rug, sobbing. I was protecting us. She wept. If that file got out, if the Attorney General saw the North Pine invoices, I would go to prison. Haley, for 20 years, they would take everything, the house, the reputation, your inheritance. So you broke my body to save your money, I asked. To save our life, she screamed. Do you think I did this for fun? Do you think I enjoyed watching you in that hospital bed? I was sick over it. I threw up every day you were in rehab. Then why didn't you visit me? I yelled back. Why did you leave me there alone? Because I couldn't look at you, she sobbed. I couldn't look at what I had to do. She looked up at me, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. I love you, Haley. I do. Everything I have ever done, the lying, the stealing, the deals with men like Grant Holloway, I did it so you wouldn't have to be poor, so you wouldn't have to be like I was before Walter saved me. I looked at her, and in that moment, the anger drained out of me, leaving only a vast, aching pity. She believed it. That was the tragedy. She truly believed that her crimes were acts of love. She had twisted her own morality so tightly that she couldn't tell the difference between protecting her daughter and destroying her. You don't love me, Mom, I said quietly. You love the idea of us. You love the picture in the frame. But the real me? The one who breathes and bleeds and asks questions? You were willing to sacrifice her to keep the frame from breaking. I stood up, gripping my cane. Get out, I said. Haley, please, get out, I screamed. Leave the key and get out. She stood up slowly. She placed the key on the table. She looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with a terrifying mixture of love and madness. You will see, she whispered. When I am gone, you will see how hard it is to keep the world from eating you alive. She walked out into the rain. I locked the door behind her, and then I slid down the wall and cried for the mother I had wanted, the mother who would have held me when I was hurt. Instead of the mother who had hurt me to save herself, the end came 2 days later, but not the way I expected. I was at Walter's house, helping him sort through the last of the legal paperwork. When he dropped his pen, it was a small sound, a click against the wood floor. I looked up. Walter was staring at his hand, a look of mild confusion on his face. Grandpa? I said. He tried to speak, but the words slurred. One side of his face drooped. He slumped forward, his head hitting the table with a sickening thud. Grandpa. I scrambled for my phone. I dialed 911. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone twice. The ambulance ride was a blur of lights and sirens. I sat in the front, my cane jammed between my knees, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Please, I whispered, not now, not when we are so close. They rushed him into the ICU. I waited in the hallway for 4 hours. It was the same hospital where I had been after my accident. The smell of antiseptic triggered a wave of nausea so strong I had to lean against the wall. Finally, a doctor came out. He had a massive stroke. The doctor said gently, "We have stabilized him. But the damage is significant. He is awake. He is asking for you." I walked into the room. Walter was hooked up to monitors, tubes running into his arms. He looked tiny in the bed. "Haley," he rasped. "I am here." "Grandpa," I said, taking his hand. "I am here. Did we finish it?" he asked, his voice weak. "We finished it," I lied. "It is over. Mom is handled." He squeezed my hand. The grip was faint, a ghost of the strength he used to have. "Don't become her," he whispered. "What?" "Don't trade the truth for comfort," he said, his eyes locking onto mine with a sudden, fierce intensity. "Promise me." "I promise," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I promise, Grandpa." He closed his eyes. "Good," he breathed. That was the only move that mattered. He fell asleep. He didn't die that night. He held on, stubborn as ever, his heart beating a slow, rhythmic protest against the inevitable. The final meeting happened a week later. In a conference room at a neutral law firm, Walter was still in the hospital, stable but unable to speak clearly. I went in his place. Arthur Peake was by my side. Marilyn was there. She had a new lawyer, a man who looked tired. She looked diminished. The perfect hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She wore no makeup. She wouldn't look at me. "We are prepared to settle," her lawyer said, sliding a document across the table. I read it. It wasn't the settlement she had offered before. This was surrender, acknowledgement of fiduciary breach, resignation as trustee, repayment of misappropriated funds to North Pine Community Foundation. She was admitting it. Not all of it. The criminal charges for the car sabotage were still being debated by the district attorney, and Grant Holloway was still missing. But she was admitting to the financial fraud. She was admitting she had stolen from the family to cover her tracks. Arthur looked at me. "This is what Walter wanted," he said. "It secures the trust. It removes her from power." I looked at Marilyn. She was staring at her hands, twisting a ring that I knew was a fake diamond, another part of the illusion she had built. "Why?" I asked her. "Not why did you do it? Why are you signing this now?" She looked up. Her eyes were dull. "Because Grant is gone," she said quietly. "And Risley is turning state's witness. The story is over. Haley, the one I wrote, it is over." She picked up a pen and signed the document. There was no sense of triumph, no cinematic music swelling, just the scratch of a pen on paper and the sound of a radiator hissing in the corner. It was messy. It was incomplete. She wasn't going to jail today. She might never go to jail, if her lawyers could cut a deal, but she was broken. The empire she had built on lies had collapsed, and she was left standing in the rubble. Arthur slid a second document toward me. "This is the restructuring of the trust," he said. Walter drew it up the night before his stroke. I read it. Primary beneficiary, Haley Gray. Trustee, independent fiduciary, appointed by court. Provisions: full coverage of all medical expenses, physical therapy, and vocational rehabilitation, monthly stipend for living expenses independent of family control. And then, the final clause. The one-move provision. In the event of the grantor's death or incapacitation, the trust shall immediately sever all financial ties with any entity associated with Marilyn Gray, ensuring that the beneficiary, Haley, remains permanently insulated from the debts and liabilities of her mother. He had built a wall, a permanent, legal wall that my mother could never climb over. He had ensured that no matter what happened to him, I would never again be vulnerable to her protection. I signed the paper. I walked out of the office and stood on the sidewalk. The sun was coming out, weak and watery, but it was there. I took a breath. My hip hurt. My heart hurt. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. 6 months later, I was walking without the cane. I still had a limp, a hitch in my step that flared up when I was tired. But I was walking. Walter had passed away in his sleep 2 weeks after the settlement. We buried him next to my grandmother. It was a small funeral. My mother stood at the back, wearing black, and left before the service ended. We didn't speak. I had moved out of the duplex. I bought a small house near the park. Using the trust money, I had quit Northline Creative, refusing their severance, refusing their gag order, and started my own freelance design business. I was rebuilding, slowly, painfully. But it was my life. It was my truth. I was sitting in my new office, unpacking a box of books. When my phone pinged, it was an email. Sender. Anonymous. Subject. The chain. I hesitated. I almost deleted it. I was done with secrets. I was done with anonymous tips. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. I opened it. It was a single document. A scanned internal memo from Northline Creative. Dated 2 weeks before my accident. To David, CEO. From Board of Directors, North Pine Community Foundation Liaison. Haley Gray / Audit Risk. David, we have concerns regarding the designer assigned to the annual report. We have reason to believe she has accessed sensitive vendor data. This poses a significant risk to the Foundation's structural integrity. Initiate containment protocols immediately. Suggest removal from project or external intervention. Signed, J. Sterling. I stared at the name. J. Sterling. I knew that name. Jonathan Sterling. He wasn't just a liaison. He was the chairman of the board for Northline Creative, my boss's boss, and he was also on the board of Stonebridge Advisory Group. I sat back in my chair, the room going quiet. My mother hadn't acted alone. She hadn't just called Grant Holloway in a panic. The order to contain me hadn't started with her. It had started at my job. My mother was a pawn, a willing pawn, a desperate pawn, but a pawn nonetheless. The real players, the ones who moved the money, the ones who ordered the external intervention, were still out there. They were sitting in boardrooms, they were signing checks, and they thought the story was over. I looked at the document. I looked at the one-move provision framed on my wall. Walter's final gift of protection. He had given me a shield. But looking at this memo, I realized something. A shield isn't just for defense. If you hold it right, and if you move fast enough, it can be a battering ram. I picked up the phone. I dialed Tess Marlowe. Tess, I said when she answered, "It's Haley. Hey, kid, how is the leg?" "The leg is fine," I said, "but I just got an email." "What kind of email?" "The kind that says, 'We are not done.'" I said, looking at the name, Jonathan Sterling, "The kind that says, 'We are just getting started.'" Thank you for listening to this story. If Haley's journey resonated with you, or if you've ever had to fight for your own truth against the people who were supposed to protect you, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and tell me where you're listening from. I'm always amazed to see how far these stories travel. And if you want to know what happens next, if you want to see Haley take that shield and turn it into a weapon against the people at the very top, make sure you subscribe to Revenge Stories. There are more secrets to uncover, and trust me, you won't want to miss the next chapter. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about justice, family, and the lines we draw to survive. Until next time.